Mock the chosen, and fate will mock you back tenfold. They thought it was just a joke, a night of fun, a meaningless game. They sat across from the psychic, smirking, waiting to hear nonsense they could laugh about later. But what they got instead? A truth so raw, so undeniable, it shattered their arrogance. Their laughter died in their throats, their faces drained of color. And now they're haunted. The universe has a way of humbling fools. Those who mock the chosen always learn the hard way. Through terror, through regret, through sleepless nights filled with whispers they can't silence. They wanted to hear a joke about you, but what they heard instead was their own doom written in the stars. They walked in with pride, but they left with fear. And if you're a chosen one, make sure this message spreads. Press the like and subscribe button under this video to help algorithms spread it to more chosen ones. Every chosen one who hears this awakens, and every awakening sends a shockwave through the system they built to keep us asleep. Let's make them tremble. Now listen closely, chosen one. You are not like them, and that terrifies them. They know it, even if they refuse to admit it. Your energy shifts the air when you walk into a room. Your presence stirs something deep inside them, something they can't control. Fear, envy, an unshakable feeling that you are not to be underestimated. They feel it in their bones, even if their mouths still try to mock you. And that's why they went to the psychic. They wanted confirmation that their unease about you was just paranoia, that you were nothing, that their jealousy was misplaced. But the universe does not lie. The cards do not bend to their will. And when the truth came out, when the psychic's voice dropped, when the words spilled into the silence like a prophecy sealed in fate, they knew. They saw what's coming. They saw who you truly are. They saw that no matter how much they gossip, how much they laugh, how much they try to tear you down, they will never be able to stop what's already written. The chosen ones are rising, and no force on this earth can undo what has already been set into motion. You haunt them, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Your very existence is a mirror they can't escape, a reflection of everything they are not and never will be. It eats at them. It keeps them up at night. It drives them mad with questions they're too afraid to answer. Why does their presence shake me? Why do they seem untouchable? Why do I fear them, even when I laugh at them? Deep down, they already know the answer. You are chosen, and that is something they will never be. This is why they stumble in the dark, clinging to their illusions, hoping a psychic will tell them that their fears are wrong. But instead, they were told the truth. And now they are shaking, because the one they mocked is the one who will outlast them all. And to you, yes, you, the chosen one reading this right now, know this. Your presence here is no accident. Whether you're new or you've been standing strong on this path, your energy fuels this awakening. The more of us that rise, the more their fear grows. So, if you're ready to step fully into your power, obliterate the like button, hit subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to confirm what they already dread. You are unstoppable. And now, let's break this down step by step. Believe me, if you're truly chosen, you'll feel the pull to stay till the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. They wanted a laugh. Instead, they opened a gate to their own downfall. To mock the chosen is to play with fire, unaware that the flames will consume you first. They thought they were being clever. A quick joke, a harmless little prank at your expense. Just some entertainment, a way to pass the time. But in their arrogance, they forgot one crucial truth. The universe does not play games. it only deals in energy, and energy never lies. The moment they brought your name into that session, they unknowingly stepped into something far bigger than their small minds could grasp. They spoke your name in a space where truth reigns supreme, and the psychic didn't just see you, they saw everything. The tension, the connection, the unspoken truths tying them to you like invisible chains. And suddenly, the smirk they walked in with turned into a weight in their chest they couldn't shake. They expected a cheap thrill, something to confirm their own illusions. But the reading wasn't about you as much as it was about them. It became a mirror, one that stripped them bare, exposing every lie they told themselves about why they couldn't stop thinking about you. Why do they watch you so closely? Why does your presence linger in their mind long after you've left the room? Why does their laughter feel hollow every time your name comes up? The psychic didn't have to try to make it profound. The truth hit them like a sledgehammer because deep down they already knew. They weren't just mocking you, they were fixated on you. And now they couldn't ignore it anymore. What scared them wasn't just the accuracy of the reading, it was what it confirmed. The thoughts they refused to admit, the envy they tried to bury, the obsessive energy they poured into watching your every move. It was all laid bare. And worse, the universe didn't just expose them, it judged them. It made it clear that the joke they tried to turn you into had real consequences. Because chosen ones are not ordinary. Your energy is not something to be played with. You do not enter a room unnoticed. Your presence shifts the air, your aura unsettles the weak, and your very existence is a reminder of everything they will never be. They went in laughing, they left shaking. It became impossible to dismiss what they heard. They sat down expecting to feel superior, but they walked out with the sinking realization that they were the ones being watched, that the universe had been paying attention to every single time they spoke your name with malice. They crossed a line by turning you into a joke, and the universe wasted no time delivering the lesson. They wanted a cheap laugh. Instead, they were forced to confront their own weaknesses, their own insecurities, their own future. And that future, it suddenly didn't seem so certain anymore, because energy, when tampered with, has a way of revealing the truth. And the truth is, you are not the one who should be afraid. They are. Number 2, they wanted a joke, but ended up trapped in their own reflection. The mocker always becomes the mocked when the universe decides it's time to settle the score. They thought they were being clever. They walked in with smirks, throwing your name around like it was nothing, convinced they held the upper hand. To them, it was all just a joke, a little entertainment at your expense. But energy doesn't play. The universe doesn't do harmless fun. And that psychic, they weren't in on the joke. They were there to reveal what was already written. At first, it was just a game to them, until it wasn't. The moment the reading began, something shifted. The air grew heavier. The psychic's expression changed. Suddenly, it wasn't about you anymore. It was about them. And that's when the laughter stopped. Because what they had unknowingly walked into wasn't just a reading, it was a reckoning. The psychic didn't just describe you. They turned the mirror straight onto them, exposing everything they had desperately tried to ignore. Every hidden fear, every insecurity, every shadow lurking beneath their surface. It wasn't fun anymore. They thought they could control the conversation, but the universe had different plans. They wanted to mock you, but ended up being stripped bare, forced to see the ugly truth they had spent years running from. Why were they so obsessed with you? Why did they keep your name in their mouth, your presence in their thoughts, your energy in their orbit? The psychic answered the question they were too afraid to ask themselves. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't humor. It was fear. Fear that you were untouchable. Fear that you were rising, and nothing they did could stop it. Fear that you had something they would never have. They wanted a joke. They got the truth instead, and the truth was unbearable. Because the psychic didn't just call them out, they confirmed what they already knew deep down, but refused to admit. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the sickening realization that they had spent so much time watching you when they should have been fixing themselves. Whatever it was, it hit them hard. The worst part? There was no escape. Because once the truth is spoken, it can't be unheard. It lingers. It festers. It follows them home and whispers in the quiet. They walked in thinking they'd leave with a funny story to tell. Instead, they left haunted by their own reflection, by the realization that the joke wasn't on you. It was on them. And no amount of laughter can drown out the truth when the universe decides it's time to be heard. Number 3. They walked in as the hunters, but walked out as the hunted. Those who stalk the chosen will one day find themselves the prey. They walked into that room with arrogance dripping off them, convinced they were in control. To them, it was a game, a chance to poke fun, to dissect you like prey, to feed their egos with cheap laughter at your expense. They thought they held the power. But power is not about who laughs the loudest. It's about who walks away untouched. And the moment they uttered your name, the tables turned. The psychic didn't take the bait. They didn't entertain the mockery. Instead, the energy in the room shifted so fast, so hard, it knocked the smirks right off their faces. They came expecting to hear dirt on you, to confirm whatever lies they had convinced themselves of. But the psychic had no interest in feeding their delusions. Instead, they asked the one question they had been running from. Why are you so obsessed with them? That was the moment the joke collapsed. The moment the hunter realized they were the one being dissected, because suddenly it wasn't about you, it was about them. Why did your presence linger in their minds? Why did your name slip so easily from their lips? Why did they need to mock, diminish, and drag you down just to feel something? The answers were like daggers. The psychic laid it all out, their jealousy, their insecurities, their desperate need to control something, anything, to cover up how small they felt inside. They came in thinking they were looking down on you, but by the time the psychic was done, it was clear. You were the one standing above them all along. Because your energy is untouchable, every insult, every attempt to bring you down, every twisted laugh at your expense, it all bounced back, reflecting their own shortcomings. And they felt it, the weight in their chest, the creeping realization that they were the weak ones, that you were never the joke, that they had been exposed. The psychic saw through the mask, saw the cracks in their confidence, the fear they refused to admit, the envy they had buried so deep, even they were afraid to look at it. They had walked in thinking they were the ones in charge. But by the time they walked out, they felt stripped bare, disarmed, hunted. The session wasn't about you at all. It was a spotlight on their own darkness. They thought they could laugh at you, but now they can't escape the truth. And that truth will haunt them long after the session is over. Number 4. They wanted to mock you, but you became their awakening. The chosen don't chase revenge. Their existence alone is enough to unravel their enemies. They walked into that session thinking they held the power, thinking they could throw your name around like a cheap joke, twist your existence into something small, something laughable. But the moment they spoke it, they unknowingly triggered a force beyond their comprehension. Because you, the chosen one, are never just a passing thought. Your name carries weight. Your energy demands recognition. And the universe, It does not allow the chosen to be dismissed. They came to mock you, but what they got instead was a mirror so clear, so sharp, it sliced right through their illusions. The psychic didn't just talk about you. They didn't feed into the game these people thought they were playing. Instead, they turned the lens back on them. And that's when the unraveling began. Every word spoken became a thread, pulling apart their carefully constructed version of reality. The reading wasn't about you. It was about the why. Why they couldn't stop thinking about you. Why your existence lingered in their mind long after you were gone. Why, despite all their attempts to downplay you, you still mattered to them. And then, the final blow. They weren't laughing because it wasn't funny anymore. The psychic didn't just expose their thoughts about you. They exposed what those thoughts meant. They exposed the truth they had been too afraid to admit. That you weren't just some random person in their life. You were their catalyst, a force pushing them toward an awakening they never asked for. A trigger forcing them to face what they had long buried: envy, insecurity, unfulfilled potential. Your presence was disrupting them, not because you were doing anything to them, but simply because you existed. And that truth, it shattered them. They spent so much time trying to diminish you, only to realize that their very obsession with you meant you were above them all along. That every thought, every whisper, every joke at your expense was proof that you were the one in control. By the time the session ended, their arrogance was gone. The laughter had died. Their hands might have been steady, but inside, something had shifted. Because now they knew. You weren't their victim. You were their wake-up call. And there was no going back from the truth they had just uncovered. Number 5. They played with the spirit world, and now it's playing with them. Mock the unseen, and the unseen will mock you back. Only it won't be laughter, it will be fear. They thought they were just having fun, a casual night, a little entertainment, a way to get a few laughs at your expense. They sat across from the psychic, expecting nothing but a show. Maybe some vague predictions, maybe something ridiculous to fuel their arrogance. But what they didn't realize was that the moment they spoke your name, they weren't just having a conversation. They were triggering something much bigger than themselves. Because in the spirit world, intentions are everything. Their cruelty, their sarcasm, their smug little smirks. It all sent shockwaves into the unseen. They came looking for a joke, but instead, they pulled themselves straight into the storm. And the psychic? The psychic wasn't just reading you. They were reading the energy they had unleashed. And it was dark. It was messy. And it wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. Suddenly, the session wasn't about you at all. The focus shifted. Onto them. Onto the chaos they had unknowingly set in motion. The psychic picked up on things they weren't prepared to face. Shadows they had been running from. Karma that had been waiting for them. Deep, tangled threads connecting them to you. They thought they were coming to hear a joke about you. Instead, they heard truths about themselves that cut deep, exposing every flaw, every insecurity, every ugly thought they had convinced themselves didn't exist. And that's when the fear crept in, because the energy in that room shifted. They felt it, like something ancient had been disturbed. Like something unseen was now watching them. They wanted to laugh, but suddenly they couldn't. Because what rattled them most wasn't just what the psychic said, it was how it felt. Like they had touched something sacred they had no business meddling with. Like they had poked at something powerful, and now it was staring right back at them. The worst part? They had no control. They sat there, waiting for the conversation to turn back to you, for the joke to be restored. But it never happened. The psychic wasn't feeding into their little game. Instead, they were pulling back the curtain on who these people really were. And they hated it. Because suddenly, it wasn't about you. It was about them. The universe has a way of turning bad intentions into lessons, and they were getting schooled in real time. They came looking to mock you, but they left haunted, because they didn't just visit a psychic. They triggered something, a ripple effect, an energetic backlash, a force far beyond their understanding. And now, whether they admit it or not, they feel it. The weight in the air, the shift in their luck, the unsettling feeling that something is watching them. They opened a door they never should have touched, and when they walked out of that session, they weren't laughing. They were trembling, because they just scratched the surface of something far more powerful than they could ever comprehend. Number 6. They tried to mock you, only to learn you've been living in their mind, rent-free. To hate someone is to chain yourself to them, unaware that they hold the key to your own prison. They thought they had control. They thought they were the ones laughing. But when they sat down in front of that psychic, expecting entertainment at your expense, they were hit with a truth so raw, so undeniable, that it shattered their illusion of superiority in an instant. Because the reading wasn't about you. It was about them. They wanted to hear dirt, to fuel their smugness, to walk away with more reasons to feel above you. But instead, they got hit with something they weren't ready for. You've been on their mind far more than they realized. You weren't just some passing thought, some random name they casually brought up. You were a force in their subconscious, shaping their decisions, their emotions, their very sense of self. And they didn't even know it. The psychic didn't mince words. They laid it out bluntly. You weren't just someone they occasionally spoke about. You were an obsession. Every time they thought they were mocking you, they were actually feeding the connection. Every time they tried to tear you down, they were only proving how deeply you had influenced them. And the revelation hit like a gut punch, because suddenly they weren't the ones laughing anymore. They were exposed. They'd spent all this time convinced that you were beneath them, that their words, their judgments, their sneering comments put them in control. But now they had to face the humiliating truth. They weren't focused on you out of superiority. They were focused on you because they couldn't help it. Whether it was envy, admiration, resentment, or something more complicated, they had tied themselves to you without even realizing it. And hearing this from a psychic, a complete stranger who knew nothing of their thoughts, was like being stripped naked in front of a mirror they couldn't look away from. The worst part? You probably didn't even know. While they spent their time obsessing over you, measuring themselves against you, you were simply living, growing, thriving, moving forward. And that's what broke them the most. Because in the end, the joke wasn't on you, it was on them. And now they have to live with the truth that you, the one they mocked, the one they belittled, the one they tried to diminish, have had more power over them than they ever had over you. Number 7. They set a trap for you and fell into it themselves. Throw dirt on a chosen one and watch how the universe buries you in it instead. They thought they were being clever. They sat down, ready to hear something that would make them feel superior, something they could use to fuel their fragile ego. But what they didn't understand, what they were too blind to see, is that energy does not play favorites. The universe does not reward malice. They walked in with bad intentions, thinking they could laugh at your expense. But in the world of karma, intent is everything. And their intent? It was rotten from the start. So the universe responded in kind. They didn't get what they came for. They didn't get cheap entertainment. They didn't get to hear your downfall. Instead, they got a lesson in who they truly are. Because that's psychic. They didn't just see you, they saw them, and they did not hold back. What was meant to be a joke quickly turned into a brutal reflection of their own flaws, their own struggles, their own demons clawing at the surface. Suddenly, it wasn't about you anymore. It was about the ugly truth they had been avoiding. Every word the psychic spoke felt like a karmic slap to the face. It was as if the universe itself had decided to step in and speak directly to them. You get what you give. And what had they been giving? Negativity, jealousy, envy wrapped in laughter, hoping to disguise their bitterness as humor. But karma is sharp, and it does not miss. By the end of that session, the joke wasn't just on them, it was shaping them. Because energy does not disappear. It moves, it ricochets, it finds its way back to its source. And all that negativity they had sent in your direction, it boomeranged straight back to them. They left shaken, not because they suddenly respected you, not because they had changed overnight, but because they felt it. That shift, that weight, that deep, unsettling realization that they had just unleashed something they couldn't take back. Because when you mock a chosen one, you don't just hurt them. You expose yourself. You reveal exactly where you're broken. And now they're the ones living with the consequences. Number 8. The psychic unmasked. Their worst fear, your rise. The greatest fear of the envious isn't your downfall. It's the reality that they will have to watch you rise beyond their reach. They walked in expecting entertainment, a cheap thrill, a little mockery, a way to twist your name into something small and insignificant. They thought they'd hear some nonsense, something they could laugh about later, something that would confirm what they desperately wanted to believe, that you were nothing. But instead, they were forced to face the one thing they feared the most. Not your flaws, not your failures, but your potential. The psychic didn't entertain their childish game. They didn't dig for dirt or hand them a reason to feel superior. Instead, the reading took an unexpected turn, one that sent a chill straight down their spine. Because it wasn't about who you are now. It was about who you're becoming. The words hit like a prophecy. The psychic spoke of your resilience, your unstoppable drive, the fire inside you that refuses to be put out. They painted a vision of someone meant for something greater, someone rising, someone who would outgrow, outshine, and outlast the very people who doubted them. And suddenly, the joke wasn't funny anymore. Because deep down, they had always suspected it. They had seen glimpses of it before, how you kept moving forward no matter what they threw at you, how life kept opening doors for you while theirs remained shut. They had convinced themselves it was luck, that it was temporary, that one day you'd fall back to their level. But hearing it from someone who didn't even know you, hearing a stranger confirm that you were meant for more, that was their breaking point. Because it wasn't just about you anymore, it was about them. Your success, your energy, your path. It all shined a light on something they had been trying to avoid, their own limitations. And that's the thing about people who envy the chosen ones. It's not really about hating you. It's about hating what your existence forces them to see in themselves. Every time you rise, it reminds them of how they've stayed the same. Every time you break through another barrier, it exposes the fact that they've created their own. Every time you keep going, no matter what they throw at you, it shows them their own weakness. And that's what truly terrifies them. Because the psychic's words weren't just confirming your greatness, they were confirming their irrelevance. They came in hoping to hear something that would feed their delusions, that you were a fraud, that you were destined to fail, that the power they sensed in you was just in their imagination. But instead, they left with a truth they could never unhear. That you are the one to watch. That your energy is unstoppable. That your name will outlast theirs. And worst of all, they knew the psychic was right. They knew, deep down, that no matter what they say, no matter how much they try to downplay your existence, no matter how desperately they hold on to their fragile illusions, you are rising, and there's absolutely nothing they can do about it. Number 9. They tried to mock you, but ended up strengthening your protection. The foolish summon what they do not understand, and the universe ensures they pay the price. They thought they were just having fun, throwing your name into the air like it meant nothing, smirking as they turned you into the punchline of their little game. They sat across from that psychic, full of arrogance, believing that their words carried no weight. But energy doesn't work that way. The moment they spoke your name in that space, they unknowingly triggered something much bigger than their ignorance could comprehend. They called attention to you, but not in the way they expected. Because your name doesn't just exist in the physical world, it carries weight in the unseen. And by bringing you up, they didn't just mention you, they summoned the forces that protect you. The psychic felt it immediately, the shift in energy, the presence in the room that wasn't coming from them, but from you. Suddenly the laughter stopped. Because the psychic wasn't just sensing you, they were sensing what surrounds you, and it was something far greater than they were prepared for. A shield, a force, a presence that made their stomachs drop and their skin prickle with something they didn't want to name: fear. This wasn't just a conversation about you anymore. It was a warning. Because the psychic could see it clearly. Every ounce of negativity they had ever sent your way had never touched you. It had only been absorbed, transformed, and reflected back, tenfold. They thought they could mock you, but all they did was fortify you. They thought they could tear you down, but instead, their own energy fueled your protection. And that's when the realization hit them. They hadn't just played a game, they had made a mistake. A mistake that couldn't be undone. Because in their ignorance, they had done the one thing they should have never done. They drew attention to themselves in the spirit world. And now something was watching them. They left that session shaken, unsettled, questioning everything they had ever thought about energy, about karma, about you, because you were never the vulnerable one. They were. Their mockery didn't harm you. It strengthened you, and in the process, it exposed just how weak they really are. Number 10. They came for a joke, but were forced to face their own envy. Jealousy is a confession of inferiority, and the loudest mockers are always the most insecure. They thought they were in control. They thought they were just there to have a laugh, to hear something amusing about you that they could take back and whisper about behind your back. But the universe had other plans, because the moment they sat down, expecting to feed their arrogance, they were instead handed a mirror, one so sharp, so unforgiving, that they had no choice but to see the truth staring right back at them. It was never about you. The psychic didn't waste time entertaining their little game. They didn't play into their smug smirks or shallow attempts to turn you into a joke. Instead, they flipped the script, cutting straight to the core of why they were even so obsessed with you in the first place. And the answer: jealousy. That word hit like a bullet. Because jealousy wasn't something they associated with themselves. No, they were above that. They had spent years convincing themselves that their fixation on you was harmless, that their constant need to monitor your life, your choices, your every move was just normal curiosity, maybe even concern. But the psychic didn't let them hide. They stripped away the layers of delusion one by one. They called it what it was. Their comments, their gossip, their laughter at your expense. It wasn't humor. It was desperation. A pathetic attempt to soothe the ache of their own failures by trying to reduce you to something small. But you are not small, and that's what terrifies them. Because no matter how much they mock you, no matter how much they try to downplay your presence, they feel it. Your success, your potential, your undeniable ability to shine without their approval. And that's why they can't stop watching. Why your name lingers on their lips. Why their energy is always orbiting around you, even when they pretend not to care. The psychic exposed the truth in a way they couldn't ignore. They weren't stronger than you. They weren't better. They weren't even in control. Because if they were, they wouldn't be sitting there, paying for a reading about you. They left that session humiliated, stripped of every illusion they had built around themselves. Forced to acknowledge that the real problem was never you. It was them. Number 11. They tried to diminish you, but instead, they discovered you are untouchable. A force beyond understanding cannot be mocked, only feared by those who cannot grasp its depth. They walked in expecting to hear something that would feed their egos. A flaw, a weakness, a reason to justify their envy. They wanted to laugh at you, to strip you down into something small, something they could control in their minds. But what they got instead was a reality check they never saw coming. Because the psychic didn't talk about your mistakes, your past, or any so-called shortcomings. They didn't feed into the illusion these people had created in their heads about who you were. Instead, the psychic spoke of something else, something vast, something beyond them. And in that moment, they felt it, the shift, the weight of an energy they couldn't touch. You weren't just another person. You weren't someone they could pick apart and ridicule. You were a force, a mystery wrapped in something unshakable. And the moment those words left the psychic's mouth, the smirks vanished. Because suddenly, it wasn't about laughing at you anymore. It was about understanding why they felt so uneasy in your presence. They had sensed it before, but they never had the words for it. The way your energy made them restless. The way you never seemed to be affected by their gossip, their jealousy, their attempts to bring you down. And now the psychic had confirmed what they had feared all along. You are untouchable, not just strong, resilient, not just lucky, unshaken. The words hit them in a way that shook them to their core. Because they had spent so much time trying to figure you out, trying to break you down, trying to prove to themselves that you were nothing special. And yet, here they were, face to face with the truth. You are beyond them, beyond their reach, beyond their understanding. And nothing they do will ever change that. The psychic spoke of forces that watch over you, protect you, shield you from their negativity like an impenetrable wall. And that's when the realization settled in. Their jealousy, useless, their hate, powerless, their mockery, meaningless. Because none of it could touch you. They walked in thinking they were in control of the narrative. That they could reduce you to a joke, something small, something insignificant. But now they were the ones feeling small, because the truth had hit them harder than they ever imagined. You are not just living your life. You are part of something much bigger, a path, a purpose, a calling they will never comprehend. And that made you untouchable. They left that session rattled, confused, intimidated, because deep down they knew they had wasted their time, their energy, their efforts. Nothing they could do, say, or think would ever break through the force that surrounds you. And in that moment, as they walked away, They finally understood. They were never in control. You were. Number 12. They spoke your name, and the room turned against them. The weight of a chosen one's name is enough to bend the air around it, mock it, and you invite forces you will never understand. It started as nothing, a casual mention, a careless joke. A smirk exchanged between them as they spoke your name, expecting nothing more than a moment of entertainment. But the moment those words left their mouths, everything changed. The air thickened. The psychic, who had been lighthearted just moments before, suddenly froze. The conversation, once light and playful, now hung heavy in the room, as if something unseen had just entered. They all felt it, the shift, the weight, the unmistakable presence of something far bigger than them. And that's when they realized this was no joke. The psychic's tone darkened. Their expression turned from amusement to deep contemplation. Something was here, something they could not ignore. And it was you, not just you as a person, but the force tied to you. The power you carry, the energy you bring. The psychic knew instantly this wasn't ordinary. This wasn't someone who could be easily dismissed, manipulated, or laughed at. No, this was something else entirely. They tried to brush it off, but the weight wouldn't lift. The psychic hesitated, choosing words carefully, sensing that whatever surrounded you was something sacred. A current of energy that moved with intention, that commanded the space. And suddenly, it was no longer about them. It was no longer about the joke. It was about the undeniable force that entered the room the second your name was spoken. A force so protective, so magnetic, so untouchable that it made even the psychic second-guess everything they thought they knew. This wasn't fun anymore. This wasn't lighthearted. This was real. Because what stood behind your name, what moved with your presence, wasn't something they could laugh away. It wasn't something they could diminish with gossip or mockery. It was something that demanded reverence. And in that moment, the universe spoke. This is not something to be taken lightly. They felt it. The energy pressed against them, shifting the very air in their lungs. It was undeniable. It was powerful. And most of all, it was yours. The joke was dead, replaced by a silence so deep, it burned. Because now, they understood. Speaking your name wasn't just a casual mention, it was a summoning. And now, they would have to reckon with what they had just called upon. Number 13. Your light exposed their darkness, and now they can't escape it. Those who throw stones at the chosen are only shattering the fragile glass of their own reflection. They sought a weapon, a way to confirm their false superiority, a reason to mock you, to highlight your flaws, to make you the subject of their ridicule. So they sat down before the psychic, ready to hear words that would feed their arrogance. But the universe had different plans, because when the psychic's words began to unfold, they didn't reveal anything negative about you. Instead, they began to unravel something much darker, their own shadow. And that's when the unease set in. They had come looking for dirt, but all they found was a mirror so clear, so unforgiving, that it forced them to confront what they had been running from all along, the truth about themselves. They had been so focused on tearing you down that they never stopped to ask themselves why you consumed their thoughts in the first place. Why did your name linger in their mind? Why did your success enrage them? Why did your mere existence feel like an insult to them? They thought the psychic would expose something about you. Instead, the psychic exposed them. Their jealousy, their insecurities, their unhealed wounds. The psychic didn't even have to dig deep. The energy was written all over them. The resentment they carried wasn't about you. It never was. You were simply a trigger, a walking, breathing reminder of everything they lacked, everything they failed to accomplish, every dream they had abandoned. They weren't angry at you. They were angry at themselves, but they couldn't face that truth. So instead, they tried to project their hatred outward, hoping that if they could make you look small, it would make them feel bigger. But energy doesn't lie. And the psychic saw right through their mask. Their attempts to mock you, their desperate need to hear something that could be used against you. It was all exposed as a feeble distraction, a smokescreen for their own misery. As the reading continued, the psychic described it in a way they couldn't ignore, a shadow growing darker and stronger with every insult they threw your way. They had spent so much time talking about you, thinking about you, obsessing over you, without realizing they were only feeding the darkness inside them. Every joke at your expense, every sarcastic remark, every attempt to paint you as the problem, it wasn't harming you, it was harming them. Like a parasite feeding on their soul, their own negativity had been poisoning them from the inside out. And now, for the first time, they saw it. The truth was undeniable. The more they tried to diminish you, the more they were exposing themselves. And that's when the realization hit like a punch to the gut. It wasn't you they needed to focus on. It was themselves. Because all the energy they had wasted trying to bring you down could have been used to heal themselves. But they refused. Instead of facing their own shortcomings, they chose to channel their bitterness toward you. Instead of working on their own growth, they obsessed over yours. And now they couldn't unsee it. The joke they wanted to make at your expense had turned into a painful lesson they weren't ready to learn. They left that reading changed, not enlightened, not empowered, but exposed. Exposed to the raw truth that had been following them all along. That you were never their enemy. They were their own enemy. And as they walked away from that psychic session, no matter how hard they tried to shake it off, no matter how much they tried to convince themselves that it wasn't true, the seed had already been planted. A seed of awareness that would haunt them every time they spoke your name again. Because now they knew. Every word they speak against you is a confession. Every insult is a reflection. Every attempt to tear you down is proof of how deeply they are already beneath you. And that realization, that's something they can never escape. Number 14. The ultimate revelation. They thought they were mocking you, but they were unraveling themselves. The foolish throw stones at the chosen, only to find they were building their own tomb all along. They thought this would be simple, a meaningless joke, a little fun at your expense. They walked into that session full of arrogance, convinced they held all the power. They thought they were untouchable, that their mockery was just another way to fuel their egos. But what they didn't realize was that the universe does not let the blind mock the enlightened without consequence. There are no coincidences when it comes to energy. Every action, every intention, every careless word sends ripples through the unseen. And the moment they spoke your name, they sealed their fate. They didn't know that by bringing your name into that space, they weren't casting shade on you. They were shining a light on themselves. They weren't exposing your flaws. They were laying their own souls bare. Because that psychic didn't just see you. They saw them. They saw the weight of their jealousy, the wounds they never healed, the insecurities they tried to drown out with laughter. And the cruelest, most bitter truth of all, you were never their problem. They were. When they first sat down, they were confident. They smirked, thinking they were about to hear something ridiculous, something they could twist into an inside joke for later. But the universe has a way of humbling fools. The reading didn't go the way they expected. It didn't follow their script, because the truth is never convenient, and it never bows to the egos of the weak. The psychic wasn't just telling them about you, they were pulling back the curtain on them. What rattled them wasn't what they learned about you, it was what they learned about themselves. They had convinced themselves that their obsession with you was harmless, that you were nothing more than a passing thought, a name to be tossed around in conversation. But if that were true, why did the psychic keep circling back to their own energy? Why did the reading feel less like a joke and more like an interrogation? Why did it feel like something ancient and unseen was forcing them to look at the very things they had been running from? They had come expecting to feel powerful. Instead, they felt exposed. Their every thought about you, their every attempt to tear you down, their every moment of fixation, it all came back to one simple truth. They weren't laughing at you because you were weak. They were laughing because they were terrified. You were never the joke. You were the lesson they weren't ready to learn. And the moment they realized that, the ground beneath them shifted. They thought they were coming to strip you down. Instead, they were the ones left bare. The psychic saw it all, how their envy had poisoned them, how their unresolved pain had turned into projection, how every cruel word they spoke about you was nothing more than a reflection of their own self-hatred. They were forced to confront the undeniable reality that it was never about you. It was about what you represented. It was about what they lacked. You may have walked into their minds as a punchline, but you left as something far more powerful. A symbol of everything they lacked. A walking reminder of their own mediocrity. A mirror reflecting every truth they had tried to bury. And once the truth is revealed, there is no escape. No amount of laughter, no amount of denial, no amount of false bravado can unsee what has been seen. They had spent so much time trying to diminish you, thinking they were in control. But they were never in control, because you never needed their validation. You never needed their approval. And now they are the ones stuck with the realization that no matter how hard they try to pretend otherwise, they cannot stop what is already written. They cannot rewrite fate. They cannot silence the truth. By the time the session ended, one thing was painfully clear. You weren't the one who needed to change. It was them. And that truth is going to follow them for the rest of their lives. Because the universe does not forget. Karma does not overlook. And the chosen ones do not fall. They rise. And that, more than anything, is what truly terrifies them. Number 15. The universe always returns. What's sent? And this time, it sent the truth. The universe has a way of flipping the script when people least expect it. What was meant to be a joke at your expense turned into a lesson they couldn't ignore. They walked in thinking they were the ones in control, the ones laughing, the ones with the upper hand. But when they left, it wasn't amusement they carried with them. It was something much heavier. They were shaken, bewildered, and humbled in a way they never saw coming. But the universe doesn't just punish, it teaches. And while they may have walked away from that session feeling exposed, they also left with something far more valuable than any cheap joke could ever give them: the opportunity for growth. It is in moments like these that people are forced to stop pointing fingers and start turning the lens inward. For the first time, they had to sit with the weight of their own thoughts, their own intentions, their own darkness. The psychic didn't give them a funny story to tell their friends. Instead, they gave them something far more terrifying, a glimpse of themselves, raw and unfiltered. Because in that moment, you weren't just a person they tried to ridicule. You were the mirror that showed them who they truly are. This is the part they'll never admit. That long after the session ended, long after they left that room, long after they tried to shake off the unease, your presence still lingered in their minds. They couldn't just walk away and pretend it never happened. The energy had already shifted. The lesson had already been given. And the truth, once revealed, does not simply vanish. It stays. It festers. It forces them to rethink everything they once dismissed. It makes them question why they ever felt the need to mock you in the first place, why your existence bothers them so much, why they can't seem to forget what was said. For some, that realization will be too much to handle. They will bury it, pretend it never happened, go back to their old ways, and continue to mask their insecurities with laughter. But for others, this was the awakening they never saw coming. A moment of reckoning disguised as a joke. The kind of moment that forces real change. Because when the universe decides it's time for you to see yourself clearly, there is no running, there is no avoiding, there is no pretending. The only way forward is through. And that is what makes you powerful. You didn't need to fight back. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to convince them of your worth. The universe did it for you. All you had to do was exist. And in your existence, they were forced to confront their own weaknesses, their own jealousy, their own lack of direction. They wanted to make you the fool, but they left realizing they were the ones who had been blind all along. That is the power of being chosen. You don't have to chase validation. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to lower yourself to their level. The universe will always balance the scales in ways they never see coming. And as they sit with that truth, as they wrestle with the weight of what was revealed, you keep moving forward. You rise, you grow, you continue to walk your path, untouched by their games. Because the chosen never lose. The universe always makes sure of that. And just like that, the universe flipped the script. What started as a joke at your expense became a revelation they couldn't escape. They thought they were exposing you, but in the end, they were the ones left bare. Their mockery only brought them face to face with their own shadows, proving once again that the chosen never lose. The universe simply doesn't allow it. If this message resonates with you, smash that like button, subscribe, and drop 77 in the comments to confirm your power. Share this with other chosen ones, because the awakening is unstoppable.